Captain Jake Morrison checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The bridge of the USS Liberty hummed quietly around him as they moved through the dark space near the Kepler 442 system. This was supposed to be a simple patrol run. Check. The mining stations look for pirates and head back to Earth Colony Base 7. Nothing exciting ever happened on these runs. "Sir, we have something on the sensors," called out Navigator Pete Williams from his station. His voice carried a note of concern that made Jake turn around quickly. "What kind of something?" Jake asked, walking over to look at the display screen. "Multiple contacts. Big ones. They just appeared out of nowhere about 50,000 kilometers off our port side." Jake felt his stomach drop. Ships that could appear suddenly meant advanced technology. Advanced technology usually meant trouble for a small patrol vessel like the Liberty. "Battle stations," he ordered. The alarm began to sound through the ship, a low wailing that sent crew members running to their posts. Sergeant Lisa Parker rushed onto the bridge, still pulling on her combat gear. Behind her came Corporal Danny Rodriguez, Private Amanda Brooks, and Demolition Specialist Tony Carter. These were Jake's best people, the ones he trusted when things went bad. "What are we looking at, Captain?" Lisa asked, checking her rifle. "Unknown contacts. Big ones. Danny, get down to engineering and make sure our engines are ready for anything. Tony, I want you ready to blow our data cores if this goes sideways. Amanda, start sending emergency signals back to base." The bridge lights flickered as something hit their shields. Jake grabbed the nearest console to steady himself. "Sir, they're jamming our communications," Amanda reported. "I can't get anything through." On the main screen, dark shapes began to appear as they got closer. The ships were huge, at least 5 times the size of the Liberty. They had a strange organic look, like they had been grown instead of built. Red lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "They're targeting us," Pete said, his voice tight with fear. Jake opened the ship-wide communication channel. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Follow emergency protocols and prepare for possible boarding action." The next hit was much stronger. The lights went out completely for several seconds before the emergency power kicked in. Jake could smell something burning from somewhere deep in the ship. "Shields are down to 30%, reported Chief Engineer Sam Phillips over the intercom. "I don't know what they're hitting us with, but it's nothing I've ever seen before." Another blast rocked the ship. This time sparks flew from several control panels. The artificial gravity flickered, making everyone float for a few terrifying seconds before slamming them back down to the deck. "Return fire," Jake ordered. "Sir, our weapons aren't responding," Lisa said from the weapons console. "Something is interfering with our targeting systems." Jake realized with growing horror that their attackers were not trying to destroy the Liberty. They were disabling it. That meant they wanted prisoners. "All Marines to defensive positions," he commanded. "If they want to board us, we'll make them pay for every corridor." The ship shuddered again, but this time it felt different. Instead of weapon impacts, this felt like something massive grabbing onto their hull. "Captain, we have multiple breach points." Danny's voice crackled over the damaged communication system. "They're cutting through the hull in at least 6 places." Jake drew his sidearm and checked the charge. Around him, his team did the same. They had trained for boarding actions, but never against completely unknown enemies with technology far beyond their own. The first aliens came through the hull breach near the engine room. Jake heard the gunfire over the intercom before Danny's voice cut off completely. The fighting was brief and one-sided. "They're in engineering," Amanda reported. "Life signs show our people are down, but alive." More breaches opened up throughout the ship. Jake could hear the sounds of combat getting closer to the bridge. His crew was fighting hard, but whatever was attacking them had overwhelming advantages. "Sir, we should surrender," Pete said quietly. "If they wanted us dead, we'd already be floating in space." Jake hated the idea, but he knew Pete was right. The aliens had taken the ship apart piece by piece without killing anyone. They clearly had a purpose for keeping the crew alive. The bridge door exploded inward. Through the smoke came shapes that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with scaled skin that shifted from dark green to black. Their heads were elongated like reptiles, but they walked upright like humans. Red eyes glowed in the dim emergency lighting. The lead alien pointed a weapon at Jake that looked like it had been carved from bone. It spoke in a voice that sounded like gravel grinding together, but somehow Jake understood the words. You will surrender now. Resistance brings pain. Jake looked around at his remaining crew. Lisa had blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. Tony was leaning against a wall, favoring his left leg. Amanda was clutching her arm where her uniform had been torn. We surrender, Jake said, dropping his weapon. The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter. Good. You have been chosen for great honor. You will fight in the arenas of the Vorthak Empire. More aliens swarmed onto the bridge carrying devices that looked like metal collars. They moved efficiently, clearly having done this many times before. As they placed the collar around his neck, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation. Then everything went black. When he woke up, he was in a small metal cell with Lisa, Danny, Amanda, and Tony. The walls hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache. Through a small window, he could see stars moving past at incredible speed. Where are we? Amanda asked groggily. Looks like we're on one of their ships, Danny replied. Been out for maybe 6 hours based on how I feel. Jake stood up and tested the door. It was solid metal with no handle or visible opening mechanism. The walls were the same. Captain, Lisa said quietly, I count 12 of our people in cells. Around here. The aliens took everyone alive. Jake nodded. That was something, at least. But the aliens' words kept echoing in his mind. Fight in the arenas. That did not sound like they were going to be rescued anytime soon. Listen up, everyone, he said to his team. Whatever they have planned for us, we stick together. We're Marines, and Marines don't give up. Ever. Outside their cell, alien voices could be heard talking in their grinding language. Jake pressed his ear to the wall and tried to make out what they were saying, but the words meant nothing to him. All he knew was that they were heading somewhere called the arenas, and somehow he did not think it was going to be pleasant. The ship had been moving for 3 days when everything suddenly stopped. Jake Morrison felt his stomach lurch as whatever was keeping them moving through space shut off. The constant humming noise that had filled their cells went quiet. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor outside their prison. Jake counted at least 6 different sets of feet, all much heavier than human steps. The aliens were coming for them. Everyone stay calm, Jake whispered to his team. Remember what we talked about. We stick together no matter what happens. Lisa Parker nodded and helped Tony Carter to his feet. His leg was still giving him trouble from the fight on the Liberty. Danny Rodriguez flexed his hands, getting ready for whatever was coming. Amanda Brooks stood near the back of the cell watching the door. The cell door opened with a loud grinding sound. 4 Vorthak soldiers stood outside, holding those bone-like weapons. They were even bigger up close, their red eyes glowing in the dim light of the corridor. You come now, the lead alien said in that grinding voice. Time for arena. Jake and his team were pushed out of their cell and into the corridor. He could see other doors opening as more humans were forced out at weapon point. He counted quickly and saw all 12 of his people were still alive. The corridor was long and curved, made of the same dark metal as their cells. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing with a faint red light. The ceiling was high, enough that the tall aliens could walk without ducking. They were marched through several more corridors and up a ramp. Jake tried to remember the path in case they needed to find their way back, but everything looked the same. The aliens had built this place to confuse prisoners. Finally, they came to a large room with a massive door on the far side. The door was at least 20 feet tall and covered in more of those glowing symbols. Jake could hear sounds coming from beyond it. Lots of voices, all making noise at once. Through door, the alien guard said. You fight or you die. No other choice. The massive door began to open, sliding apart in the middle. Bright light poured through, so bright that Jake had to cover his eyes. The noise got much louder. It sounded like thousands of voices all shouting at once. When his eyes adjusted, Jake saw they were looking into an enormous circular pit. The walls rose up at least 100 feet on all sides, covered with rows and rows of seats. Every seat was filled with Vorthak aliens, all of them making that grinding laugh sound. The floor of the pit was covered in sand, and Jake could see dark stains that he did not want to think about too hard. This was definitely an arena, and people had died here before. "Move," the guard said, pushing Jake forward with the tip of his weapon. The 12 humans walked out onto the sand. The crowd noise became even louder when they saw the prisoners. Jake looked up at the thousands of red eyes, staring down at them, and felt his skin crawl. A voice boomed out over the arena, speaking in the Vorthak language. Jake could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. Someone was announcing them like they were entertainment. "Stay close," Jake told his team. "Watch all directions." The voice stopped talking, and for a moment the arena was quiet except for the shuffling of feet in the sand. Then Jake heard something that made him freeze. On the other side of the arena, another door was opening. More figures walked out onto the sand, but they were not what Jake had expected. These were not Vorthak warriors or wild beasts. They looked almost human, but not quite right. There were 8 of them, all very tall and thin. Their skin was pale, almost white, and they had large black eyes that took up most of their faces. Their arms and legs were longer than they should be, giving them a stretched appearance. They moved in a group, staying close together like Jake's team. When they saw the humans, they stopped walking and stared. One of them, taller than the others, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was soft and musical, completely different from the harsh grinding of the Vorthak. "Are you the ones called? Humans?" the being asked in broken but understandable words. Jake was so surprised to hear something other than alien threats that it took him a moment to answer. Yes, we're human. Who are you?" "We are called Ethereal by the Vorthak. Our true name cannot be spoken in your language. I am called Kale." The crowd was getting restless. Jake could hear them making angry noises like they were not happy that the two groups were talking instead of fighting. "Listen," Jake said quickly. "I think they expect us to fight each other, but we don't have to do what they want." Kyle tilted his elongated head to one side. "You would not attack us?" "No, we're all prisoners here. The real enemy is up there watching us." Amanda Brooks moved closer to Jake. "Captain, look at the walls around the arena. There are weapons hanging there. Swords, spears, other things." Jake saw she was right. The walls were lined with racks of weapons, clearly meant for the prisoners to use against each other. The booming voice started speaking again, and this time Jake could hear anger in it. The crowd was getting louder too, making threatening sounds. "They are not happy," Kyle said. "They expect blood. They expect death." "Well, they're going to be disappointed," Jake replied. One of the other Ethereal moved closer to Kale and whispered, something in a language that sounded like wind chimes. Kale's large black eyes went wide. "What is it?" Lisa asked. "My companion says more prisoners come. The Vorthak release others into arena when first groups do not fight." As if responding to his words, a third door opened. This time, what came out made Jake's heart race. 6 creatures that looked like giant insects walked onto the sand. They were each about the size of a human, but covered in hard, shell-like armor. They had 4 arms and moved with quick, jerky motions. Their heads were triangular with large compound eyes. Behind them came 4 beings that looked like they were made of crystal. They were human-shaped, but seemed to be carved from some kind of clear stone that reflected the arena lights. Finally, a pack of wolf-like creatures bounded through the door. But these wolves were bigger than any Jake had ever seen, and they walked on their back legs like humans while keeping their front paws free. Now there were 5 different groups scattered across the arena floor, all of them armed with nothing but whatever they could grab from the weapon racks. The crowd was going wild with excitement. Jake realized that the Vorthak had done this before. They threw different species together and watched them tear each other apart for entertainment. "Listen to me," Jake called out loudly enough for all the groups to hear. "We don't have to do this. We can choose not to fight." The insect creatures clicked and chittered at each other. The crystal beings stood perfectly still. The wolf creatures sniffed the air and growled softly. Kale spoke up. "The Vorthak will not allow this. If we do not fight, they will make us fight." "Then we fight them," Jake said, pointing up at the crowd. Not each other. The booming voice returned, much angrier now. Jake did not need to understand the language to know they were being threatened. High above them, in what looked like a special viewing box, Jake could see a massive Vorthak, wearing elaborate armor and jewelry. This one was clearly in charge, and he was not happy with what he was seeing. The Vorthak leader raised one clawed hand, and suddenly the arena floor began to shake. Panels slid open in the walls, and mechanical devices emerged. They looked like floating metal balls with weapon attachments. Combat drones, Danny said grimly. Looks like they're going to force the issue. Jake looked around at the other prisoner groups. They were all trapped together in this arena, whether they liked it or not. All right then, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. If we have to fight, let's fight smart. Anyone who wants to live through this, stay close and work together. The combat drones began to move toward the center of the arena, their weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. The real battle was about to begin. The combat drones moved faster than Jake Morrison had expected. The first one shot a beam of red energy that hit the sand right where he had been standing a second before. The sand turned to glass where the beam touched it. Move, Jake shouted to everyone in the arena. Spread out but stay in groups. The ethereal moved like dancers, flowing across the sandy floor. Kyle raised his long arms, and somehow one of the combat drones stopped moving. It just hung in the air, spinning slowly. How? Did you do that? Lisa Parker called out as she rolled behind a weapon rack. We can touch minds of simple machines, Kale replied, but only for short time. The insect creatures moved in perfect formation, like they shared one brain. When a drone fired at them, they scattered in 6 different directions at once, then came back together behind the machine. Their clawed hands tore into its metal shell. The crystal beings did something even stranger. One of them stepped directly into a drone's energy beam. Instead of being hurt, the crystal creature seemed to absorb the energy and grow brighter. Then it pointed at another drone and shot the same energy back at it. The wolf creatures worked, as a pack, just like real wolves. 3 of them ran in circles around a drone while the 4th jumped on it from behind. Their claws and teeth made quick work of the machine's armor. Jake's team grabbed weapons from the nearest rack. Danny Rodriguez picked up something that looked like a sword with an energy blade. Amanda Brooks found a spear that hummed with power. Tony Carter limped over to what looked like a grenade launcher. Tony, be careful with that thing, Jake warned. Don't worry, Captain. I know explosives. More drones poured out of the wall openings. Jake counted at least 20 of them now, all moving toward the center of the arena where the prisoner groups were gathered. We need to work together, Jake shouted to the other groups. Alone, we all die. One of the insect creatures clicked and chittered at its companions. Then it approached Jake, moving carefully to show it was not a threat. We hear you, human, it said in a voice like rustling leaves. We are hive-born. We understand cooperation. Good. What can your people do? We are strong. We are fast. We work as one mind with many bodies. One of the crystal beings glided over to them. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music. We are shattered. We can take energy and give it back. We can also make light very bright or very dark. The largest of the wolf creatures padded over on its hind legs. Fenris pack fights as one. We have good nose, good ears, good teeth. Jake nodded. All right, here's what we do. Ethereal, can you stop more of those drones? Kale concentrated, and 2 more combat drones froze in the air. Not many. Not for long. Machines fight back in minds. That's okay. Hiveborn, you're fast and strong. Can you get to those wall openings and stop more drones from coming out? The insect creatures clicked to each other rapidly. Yes, we can block holes. Shattered. Keep absorbing their energy attacks and firing. Back. Fenris. Work with my people to take down the ones that are already out here. The wolf leader showed its teeth in what might have been a grin. Good plan. We like. The alliance went into action. The hive-born moved like lightning across the arena floor, reaching the wall openings before more drones could emerge. They used their forearms to grab pieces of broken machines and jam them into the holes. The shattered spread out, and began absorbing energy beams from multiple drones at once. They glowed brighter and brighter until they looked like small suns, then released all that energy in devastating blasts. The Fenris pack worked with Jake's Marines in perfect coordination. The wolves would surround a drone and knock it down, then the humans would move in with their energy weapons to finish it off. Kyle and the other ethereal stood in the center, their large black eyes closed in concentration. Every few seconds, another combat drone would stop moving and hang helplessly in the air. The crowd of Vorthak spectators was going crazy. Jake could hear them roaring and stamping their feet. Some of them sounded angry, but others seemed excited by the unexpected cooperation. "This is not what they wanted to see," Amanda said as she speared another drone. "They wanted us to kill each other." "Too bad for them," Danny replied, slicing through a drone's armor with his energy sword. Tony Carter had figured out how to use the alien grenade launcher. Each shot released a ball of crackling energy that could destroy 2 or 3 drones at once. "Jake, we're actually winning this thing." But Jake noticed something troubling. High above in the special viewing box, the Vorthak leader was talking to other aliens around him. He did not look happy, and he kept pointing down at the arena floor. "Something's wrong," Jake said to Kale. "That big one up there is planning something." Kale opened his eyes and looked up at the viewing box. His face went very pale. "Yes, he is very angry. In his mind, I sense more danger coming." As if responding to Kale's words, new doors began opening around the arena. But this time, what came out was not combat drones. Massive creatures stomped onto the sand. They were twice as tall as humans and covered in thick armor plating. Each one carried weapons that looked like they could level buildings. "Vorthak warriors," the Fenris leader growled. "Real fighters, very dangerous." Jake counted 12 of the armored giants spreading out around the arena floor. Each one was armed with different weapons. Energy cannons, blade weapons that crackled with electricity, devices that Jake could not even identify. "They're trying to force us to fight each other," Lisa realized. "If we don't, they'll kill us, all with those things." The booming voice returned, speaking in the Vorthak language. This time, the meaning was clear even without translation. The alien leader was giving them an ultimatum. "He says we choose," Kale translated. "Fight each other or fight his warriors. But he thinks his warriors will kill us all." Jake looked around at their unlikely alliance. The Hiveborn, the Shattered, the Fenris, the Ethereal, and his own Marines. They had worked together to defeat the drones, but these new enemies were different. These were trained soldiers. "What do you all think?" Jake asked the group leaders. The Hiveborn clicked rapidly among themselves. "We choose to fight together. Death comes to all anyway if we fight each other." Shattered agree. The crystal being chimed. "Better to die free than live as entertainment." The Fenris leader howled softly. "Pack stays together. We fight or die as one." Kale nodded slowly. "Ethereal will stand with Alliance. We have seen enough death." Jake felt something he had not expected in this terrible place. He felt proud. Here were 5 different species from different parts of the galaxy, all choosing to stand together against impossible odds. "All right then," he said, raising his weapon. "Let's show these Vorthak what happens when you underestimate the power of cooperation." The Vorthak warriors began moving toward them, their heavy footsteps shaking the arena floor. Each step brought them closer to a fight that would determine whether this strange alliance would survive. But Jake noticed something else. Some of the Vorthak in the crowd had stopped cheering. They were watching in silence, and a few of them actually seemed impressed by what they were seeing. Maybe, Jake thought, not all of their captors were completely without honor. The first Vorthak warrior raised its massive energy cannon and aimed it directly at the group of allied prisoners. The real test of their cooperation was about to begin. The fight with the Vorthak warriors lasted 3 hours. When it was over, half the arena floor was covered in broken armor and melted sand. The Alliance had won, but the cost was high. 2 of the Hiveborn were badly hurt, and 1 of the Fenris. Pack had a deep cut across his side. Jake Morrison sat against a weapon rack, breathing hard. His left arm was burned from a close call with an energy weapon, but he was alive. Around him, the other survivors tended to their wounded. The crowd had gone completely silent. Thousands of Vorthak stared down at the arena floor where 5 different species had just defeated 12 of their best warriors. Jake could feel their shock like a weight in the air. Back to cells, came the grinding voice of the guards. They sounded different now, less confident. The guards were more careful this time as they moved the prisoners. They kept their weapons ready and stayed farther away. Jake noticed they had brought twice as many guards as before. In the cell block, the alliance groups were placed close together. Jake found himself sharing a cell with Kale and 2 other ethereal. The thin walls between cells had cracks that allowed quiet conversation. "That was not supposed to happen," Kale said softly. In their minds, I felt complete surprise. They have never seen species work together like this. "Good," Jake replied. "Maybe now they'll think twice about throwing us into that arena again." But Lisa Parker's voice came through the wall from the next cell. "Captain, I don't think we're going to get that lucky." Amanda overheard the guards talking. "They're planning something bigger." Amanda Brooks spoke up from her cell. "They called it the Festival of Blood. It's some kind of major event where all the arena ships come together. Hundreds of prisoner groups fighting at the same time." Danny Rodriguez whistled softly. "That sounds like a lot of witnesses to what we can do. Or a lot of ways to die," Tony Carter added grimly. Jake thought about this for a long time. The Vorthak were clearly planning to use their alliance as the main attraction for this festival, but maybe that could work in their favor. "Kale, can your people interfere with their ship systems?" "Some. We can touch simple machine minds, but their main computers fight back. We would need to be very close." Jake turned to the wall where he knew the Hiveborn were listening. "What about you? Can you dig through these walls?" The clicking voice of their leader came back. "Yes. Walls are strong but not too thick. We can make holes, but slowly and quietly." "Shattered," Jake called softly. "Can you overload their power systems?" The musical voice replied. "If we absorb enough energy at once, yes, but very dangerous, could kill us." "Fenris Pack, how good are you at moving through small spaces?" The wolf leader's voice was barely a whisper. "We can go where others cannot. Good at staying hidden." Jake felt a plan starting to form in his mind. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. "Listen, all of you. What if we don't wait for this festival? What if we make our own plan?" For the next several days they worked on the details. The Hiveborn began carefully digging through the walls during the times when the guards were not watching. They moved very slowly, making holes just big enough for the Fenris Pack to crawl through. The ethereal spent their time learning about the ship's systems. Kyle could touch the minds of the simpler machines and map out where everything was located. He found the power core, the engine room, the bridge, and most importantly, the hangar, where the Vorthak kept their smaller ships. Amanda Brooks used her intelligence training to watch the guards and learn their routines. She figured out when they changed shifts, when they brought food, and when the corridors were empty. The Shattered practiced controlling their energy absorption. They learned they could store power for longer periods and release it in more focused beams instead of wild explosions. Lisa Parker worked with the Fenris Pack to scout the ship during the night cycle. The wolves could move through the ventilation systems and report back on what they found. Tony Carter studied the alien technology, figuring out how their weapons worked and what kind of explosives might be hidden around the ship. He found that some of their own equipment could be modified to work against Vorthak systems. Danny Rodriguez planned escape routes and backup plans. He mapped out 3 different paths to the hangar and identified places where they could make their stand if the plan went wrong. On the 5th day, everything was ready. The festival was supposed to begin the next morning. Jake could hear the excitement in the guards' voices as more arena ships arrived. Through the small window in his cell, he could see dozens of massive vessels gathering around them. "Tonight," Jake whispered to the others. "Everyone ready?" The responses came back one by one. Hiveborn ready. Shattered ready. Fenris ready. Ethereal ready. Jake's own team confirmed they were prepared. Lisa had made contact with other human prisoners throughout the ship. Danny had his escape routes memorized. Amanda knew exactly when the guard shifts would change. Tony had his improvised explosives ready. The plan was complex but simple at its heart. During the sleep cycle, the Fenris pack would move through the ventilation system and take out the guards in the critical areas. The Hiveborn would break through their cell walls and free all the prisoner groups. The Ethereal would disable as many ship systems as possible. The Shattered would overload the main power grid to create chaos, and the humans would lead the assault on the bridge and hangar. But Jake knew the most important part was what happened after they escaped the ship. They had to make sure other prisoners throughout the Vorthak fleet knew what was possible. They had to spread the idea that different species could work together. "Remember," Jake said quietly, "this isn't just about us getting free. This is about showing everyone that cooperation is stronger than conquest." The lights in the cell block dimmed for the night cycle. Jake could hear the guards settling in for what they thought would be a quiet shift. High above them, the Vorthak commander was probably making final preparations for his grand festival. He was expecting to show thousands of spectators how weak and divided the prisoner species were. Instead, he was about to learn what happened when you brought together the best fighters from across the galaxy and gave them a common enemy. Jake checked his improvised weapon one last time and waited for the signal to begin. The greatest escape attempt in the history of the Vorthak Empire was about to start. The attack began at exactly midnight ship time. Jake Morrison heard the soft scratching sound that meant the Fenris pack was moving through the air vents above his cell. 3 minutes later, he heard the first guard fall. The Hiveborn had been working on the cell walls for days. When the moment came, they pushed through the weakened metal like it was paper. The sound was barely a whisper, but suddenly prisoners were free and moving through the corridors. Kale and the Ethereal closed their eyes and reached out with their minds. All over the ship, simple machines began to malfunction. Door locks opened when they should stay closed. Communication systems sent random signals. Even the lights began flickering in patterns that confused the remaining guards. The Shattered had been storing energy for hours. Now they released it all at once into the ship's main power grid. Explosions echoed through the hull as power cores overloaded. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Jake led his team and a group of freed human prisoners toward the bridge. They moved quickly but carefully through corridors filled with smoke and sparking electrical panels. The ship felt like it was tearing itself apart. "Bridge is 2 levels up," Danny Rodriguez said, checking his map. "But there's a lot of guards between us and there." They met their first real resistance at the main stairway. 6 Vorthak guards had taken position behind an energy barrier, firing at anything that moved. Their weapons lit up the smoke-filled corridor with deadly red beams. "Shattered, can you handle that barrier?" Jake called out. One of the crystal beings stepped forward and absorbed the barrier's energy in seconds. The Vorthak guards stumbled backward as their protection disappeared. The Fenris pack hit them from behind, coming through vents the guards never knew existed. The fight was over in minutes. They climbed the stairs, stepping over unconscious guards and broken equipment. The ship was shaking now as more systems failed throughout the hull. Lisa Parker and her team had split off to secure the hangar bay. Through the comm system, Jake could hear the sounds of fighting from that direction too. But Lisa's voice came through clearly. "Hangar secured, Captain. We've got 3 Vorthak ships intact and ready to fly." "Good work, Lisa. Hold that position." Tantiwan. Bridge doors were massive and heavily armored. But Tony Carter had prepared for this. His improvised explosives turned the doors into scrap metal in one huge blast. Jake and his team rushed through the smoke onto the bridge of the Vorthak arena. Ship. The bridge was enormous, with control stations designed for the tall alien warriors. Red emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. The Vorthak commander was there, along with 4 other officers. They were all armed and ready to fight. The commander was the biggest Vorthak Jake had ever seen, covered in elaborate armor that marked him as high-ranking. "Surrender," Jake called out, pointing his weapon at the commander. "Your ship is taken." The commander made that grinding laugh sound. "You think you have won, small human? This ship is one of 50 in the fleet. You will be hunted down and destroyed." "Maybe, Jake replied. "But we've proven something here today. We've shown that different species can work together, and that idea is going to spread." The commander's red eyes glowed with anger. He raised his weapon, but Kale appeared beside him. The ethereal placed one long hand on the commander's head, and the huge alien collapsed to the deck. "His mind is now quiet," Kyle said simply. The other Vorthak officers looked at their fallen commander and slowly lowered their weapons. Without their leader, they seemed lost and confused. Amanda Brooks quickly moved to the communication console. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from other ships in the fleet. Sounds like there are more prisoner uprisings happening." Jake felt a surge of hope. "The plan is working. Other prisoners saw what we did and they're fighting back too." Danny Rodriguez was studying the navigation controls. "Jake, I think I can fly this thing. The controls are different, but the principles are the same. Do it. Set course for human space." But before they could leave, Jake had one more thing to do. He opened the ship-wide communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human military. To all, prisoners on all ships, you are not alone. Different species can work together. We are stronger when we cooperate than when we fight each other. Take your ships, take your freedom, and remember what we learned here today." The message went out to the entire Vorthak fleet. On dozens of ships, prisoners who had been planning their own escapes heard the words and took action. From the bridge, Jake could see other arena ships in the distance. Several of them were showing signs of internal fighting. Explosions lit up their hulls, and some were beginning to drift as their engines failed. "Time to go," Lisa's voice came over the comm. "I've got ships loaded with freed prisoners ready to launch." Jake took one last look around the bridge of the Vorthak ship. 6 months ago, he had been a simple patrol captain worried about pirates and supply runs. Now he was leading an alliance of species he had never imagined could exist. The Hiveborn, the Shattered, the Fenris, and the Ethereal had all chosen to stay together. They had become more than just an alliance. They had become friends. "Kale, will your people come with us?" Jake asked. "Some will go with you to human space," Kale replied. "Others will return to our worlds to spread word of what happened here. The galaxy must know that cooperation is possible." As their small fleet of captured ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, Jake began recording a message for Earth and the human colonies. He had to warn them about the Vorthak Empire, but he also had to tell them about the Alliance. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy. There were other species who valued cooperation over conquest, peace over war. The Vorthak had made a mistake when they threw different species together and expected them to destroy each other. Instead, they had created something new. They had created hope. The ships carried their freed prisoners toward human space, but they also carried something more valuable. They carried the knowledge that the galaxy was full of potential friends, not just enemies. Jake looked out at the stars ahead of them and smiled. The real work was just beginning. They had to build relationships between worlds, create communication networks between species, and prepare for the day when the Vorthak Empire would come looking for revenge. But they would not face that day alone. They had allies now, scattered across the galaxy but united by the memory of what they had accomplished together in the arena. The age of cooperation had begun,